Namaskaram, myself Megha Arunodayam. Most of us would have seen these images circulating on the internet either as WhatsApp statuses, Instagram stories, or even in WhatsApp groups. But to all those people who are sharing these images, titling it as the demolition of democracy, I would simply like to say that before spreading something on the internet or putting up something on the internet, it is our responsibility to check whether that's right or not, to check whether that has sense or not. But before checking it or before knowing what is even in it, please do not share it on the social media apps just because somebody else did. It's not how it works. Before putting it up, just check whether those are right, whether that makes sense or not. Because first of all, I would like to start with this image because currently this parliament, Sengol, all those debates are going on. I mean, the sad part is I thought to ignore all of them, but then this seemed to be multiplying. I mean, a lot of people, without even knowing, I confronted some of them and nobody had any idea what was going on actually. That image. So first of all, let me say that when we compare two things, we must compare it on the same basis. You cannot compare one person's height to some person's weight. That's not how comparisons work. When you compare, it has to be on the same basis. Now what's wrong with this picture is that the above picture is Pandit Nehruji with his cabinet of ministers, whereas the second one is Prime Minister Narendra Modi with the Athinam. Now how does that work? First one is the Prime Minister with his cabinet of ministers. If you had to compare the picture with Narendra Modi and his cabinet of ministers. How are you even thinking of comparing these two images? It makes no sense. It is two images taken on two different occasions. It is not at all worthy of comparison. Because the second picture is Prime Minister with the Acharyas from Thiruvavudurai Athinam. Secondly, so the title goes with the demolition of democracy. I would like to say that not every word from our Bharatiya Bhasha, let that be Malayalam, Sanskrit, Hindi, Tamil, jo bhi ho, you cannot bring some words. There are some words which you cannot bring the complete exact definition from the English language. You cannot translate properly with the same meaning of Indic words into English. For example, dharma. Name any one English substitute for that word. There isn't one. Man or manasa in Malayalam. Do you have an English substitute? No. So similarly, some words which we use in English is not equivalent, right? It might have, similar meanings, but it's not equivalent. For example, many articles, newspapers have been using the word scepter. Now the word scepter and Sengol, that Sengol is a Tamil word, whereas in Malayalam we say Chengol. They do not have the same meaning. Scepter, like people say, stands for monarchy, authority, absolute power, sovereign control, domination, etc. used by the kings from many other Western countries and European countries, Egypt including. But a Sengol is different. The values that a Sengol or a Chengol stands for is different. It has a meaning of fair, equitable governance, impartial, justice and dharma. Those are the meanings which it stands for. It is not a symbol of monarchy or absolute power. It is absolute bogus. That is why I am repeating it again and again. Before spreading something on the internet, just try rechecking it. Just ask someone who knows better than you. Now let us talk about the history of Sengol, because I thought giving it a bit of historical background would make a little bit more sense for people who are comparing Nehruji and Modiji's picture. What happened was, in 14th August 1947, Nehruji was given the Sengol, the previous one, to symbolize the transfer of power. That was an actual transfer of power from the British to the Bharatvarsh. Now, Mr. Mountbatten and Nehru had a conversation between how the transfer of power would happen, and Nehruji turned to the esteemed statesman C. Rajagopalachari, and he was the one who gave the idea of bringing in the Sengol, which stood for the transfer of power. Right, when a new king comes in, the king would be given a kiridam and a chengol. Right, kiridam means crown, chengol means Sengol itself. Now that is a ritual rooted in the ancient legacy of Bharat, mainly Chola dynasty, but not just Chola, but most of the Bharat kings. It originated from Tamil Nadu. Now, this is not a bogus made-up story like the opposition says, because this was said by the Tiruvavaduthurai Athinam themselves. In 14 August 1947, when Nehruji and the C. Gopalachari visited the Tiruvavaduthurai Matham, they were the ones who made a Chengol from a jeweler in Chennai, and then they took it to the parliament, and it was handed over by the priest, a priest as in Pujari, Acharya from the Tiruvavaduthurai Matham, to the then Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of independent Bharat, that is Jawaharlal Nehru. The same processes took place even back then. Now coming to the story behind the Sengol. Now there are multiple evidences which state that the Sengol was a symbol of justice, righteousness, equity and fair governance. One famous example, very famous story which most of us Malayalis and Tamilians know is the story of Kannagi. Now Kannagi is worshipped as Aatugalamma in Thiruvananthapuram, that is my district, Kerala. Whenever we face some difficulty, the first name which comes into our mind is Aatugalamma. So that story is very popular among us Tamilians and Malayalis, and yet still we are the ones who are debating around Sengol, which is very unfortunate. Now the story of Kannagi is very, in short, what happened was, Kannagi's husband, she was a very devout wife, her husband was beheaded by the king because he thought that Kannagi's husband stole the queen's padasara, that is anklet. Kannagi raged into the king's palace and asked for justice, but her husband was already beheaded. What happened next was, she was a devout wife, so she had the ability to curse. She curses the king, and the king falls down into the ground, and his Sengol was bent. Why was that bent? Because that symbolizes injustice and partial governance. That is a bad governance. Even though the king wasn't bad, he mistakenly killed Kannagi's husband. The Sengol was bent, and the king sacrificed his life because he did a mistake, and the Sengol was made straight again. So the king sacrificed his life for good governance, and the Sengol, which was bent, was made straight again. So a selfless governance was given much more importance. This happened way before Greeks found out the definition of democracy. We Tamilians, Kannadigas, Malayalis, the south of India are the ones who are pioneer in saying that democracy was made by Greeks. What about Basavanna then? If the democracy was made by Greeks, what about Basavanna? So we forget our own history and spread bogus on the social media, which is very unfortunate and sad. Kindly let us take a pledge to educate ourselves and try not to post things on social media without even knowing what it is in reality. And what happened was, after the Acharya of the Athinam gave the Sengol to Nehruji back in 1947 August, he took it to the Teen Murti Bhavan, and it is currently in the Teen Murti Bhavan. It is popularly known as the walking stick of Nehru. A Sengol with this rich legacy was merely reduced to a walking stick. That is why most of the people who spread these images does not know about the Sengol which Nehru had, because it wasn't a Sengol, it was a walking stick, right? But now the real value and importance is given to Sengol, and it is kept in the parliament itself, not in somebody's residence. So those are the backdrops about Sengol and the parliament controversy. Now I must also say that some people have been saying that the parliament only had Hindu priests. It's not even Hindu priests, it's acharyas, Hindu acharyas. What about others? What about inclusivity? My dear friends, when we see something, just make sure that you see the entire thing. And half truths are always dangerous than a lie. What happened was, only the Sengol giving part was done by the Shaivite Matham. We had 12 prayers from 12 religions in the parliament. Those were not circulated, it did not go viral, nobody put up those as their WhatsApp statuses and Instagram story. Actually that happened. People who were actually interested in this were watching it on TV, and we saw it. On that day itself, we saw 12 prayers of 12 different religion. People only saw the Sengol part and the Hindu acharyas, and they got triggered. So I'll just put up the link of that video of different multiple faith prayers which took place in the parliament. So this was not at all a planned video. I just wanted to make sure that people knew what was actually going on instead of spreading misinformation on social media. And at the end, I would also like to suggest all of you a book, that is India, That is Bharat, written by J. Sai Deepak sir. It is a series of 3 books. 2 have been published and the 3rd one is yet to come. The 2nd book is about Pakistan and those history. This is about colonialism and how we are still stuck up in a colonial mindset, and it also shows about different schools of thought, decolonial, post-colonial, pre-colonial, a lot of schools of thought. And it is an amazing book written by the legendary J. Sai Deepak sir. Most of us would have read it, but in case you haven't, just give it a read. The chapter 1 itself is very informative, and it will be of use for us because we are on the pathway of making Bharat Atmanirbhar and also in a way of decolonizing ourselves. Like Dr. Shashi Tharoor sir from the opposition, the only man from the opposition who stood up and spoke about it. Let us embrace the tradition and the symbol. And at the end of this, I would also like to say that I am very happy and proud as a Bharatiya to see the new parliament being inaugurated. All those pujas and multiple faith prayers, of course. It was such a delight to our eyes, and I would say that all of you just go listen to the Prime Minister's speech at the inauguration. Whatever he said, there are some things which I noticed that people always get stuck on one part which they find controversial and they tend to skip the others. Just go watch the whole entire video. Trust me, it's going to be nice. And I'm very happy that we got the Atma of Bharat back. Jai Hind and Jai Bharat.